this is this is like such a hindrance for a lot of us, and we don't even know it because we don't know how to identify it. We don't know what it feels like. But in this video, I'm going to talk about the price of ego. This was a big struggle for me for a long time. I didn't even realize, we all have an ego, but I did not know what it was costing me. I did not know how this was showing up in my life. So let's just start here. What is an ego? And as soon as I walk through this definition, you're going to be like, oh, an ego is a false sense of self. It's a false sense of self. It's an image that we created over time. And now, granted, it's not something that you like waking up like, okay, this is the person I'm gonna be today. Like I'm this type of person. I'm gonna think these type of thoughts. No. Why an ego is so dangerous is because it's silently built. The things that you were afraid of as a kid, you're still afraid of. The things that made you angry and made you feel insecure, you're still insecure about it. The things that kept you up at night that you worried about in your early 20s, you still do those. And that's the reason why ego is so costly, because the identity, the habits, and the patterns, they're built in the background of your lifestyle, right? And as a believer, this can be detrimental because you're never going to be perfect, but an ego could present so many blind spots, things that you're doing on autopilot that may be hurting people, may be hurting relationships, may make other people feel uncomfortable. But because this has been established over a 6, 8, 10, 11 year period, you're doing these things and you're completely numb to the aftermath of whatever you're doing. So that's the basis. Now you see why I'm like, this video is critical. That's the basis of an ego. It's a false sense of self. So when you are operating in your ego, whatever that is, man, you may have a short temper. You may don't trust people. And for me, that was a big thing for me, bro. Like, I just had a tough time trusting people. I'm not gonna go into my childhood. If you know my music, if you've listened to any of my songs, you can kind of already get a glimpse of it. But trusting people was a big part of my journey. And my ego, like even as I would develop relationships with new people, that was one of the first things, like I would communicate like, yo, man, I just letting people know up front, like I have a hard time trusting people. Even though that may be true, how do you think I make the other person feel? Right? It's like, oh man, like I barely know this dude. That's the first thing he's telling me. So now I'm making other people feel like they're walking on eggshells, right? So for me, as God began to reveal this stumbling block in my identity, man, it began to give me so much freedom. Because here's the thing, when you realize that you are operating out of ego, which is probably 90% of the time, you now have the key to give yourself freedom, because it's a false sense of self. It's not who you truly are. I love following Jesus, and one of Jesus' most effective attributes is love. So how you gonna be a follower of Jesus and say that you love him, but everything about your actions and your speeches say, man, I don't trust people. People make me anxious. People make me nervous, right? This is the false sense of self. And if you say you're a Christ follower, this is the ultimate path of fulfillment, to look like Christ, right? So what do? How do we overcome this? How do we address it, right? Number one is you got to deal with yourself. What are some things that you don't like about yourself, and become extremely aware of them? Now, I'm not saying be extremely critical, right? But there's things that you know, like a person who overshares, bro. A person who overshares, the moment that you are done oversharing, you in your head like, why did I say that? I shared too much. This is a complete stranger. They did not need to know that, right? So this isn't going to be hard work for you to be like, examine yourself and say, yo, why do I do this? Why do I do this? Why when people challenge my opinion, I feel threatened, right? That all of those things are ego. And here's the reality of an ego. A person who is driven by their ego is never free. You're never free. Oh, and the enemy wants you right there. You want to know why? Because the ego requires performance. How do I know that? Well, one, I was a prisoner of the ego. But two, the ego is a false sense of self. So if it's a false sense and it's not who I truly am, for me to perform for me to operate out of my ego, what? It requires me to perform. But because it's been built years and years and years in the background, I don't realize what I'm doing. And that is the price of ego. So, one, become extremely aware about the things that don't give you peace, that's not in alignment with who God has created you to be. And that's two. Line your life up, your lifestyle, your habits, your patterns up against scripture. And anything that's not in alignment, sit with it. It took me maybe about 4 years, and I'm still a work in progress. But it took me about 4 years to get to the point where if a person treat me a certain way in a coffee shop, I'm still ready to love you because I'm not performing out of hurt. I'm good. Now, granted, don't touch me, but your words can't hurt me because I know who I am. So whoever you're speaking to, 9 times out of 10, it's because you're not dealing with yourself. So I have the capacity in me because I've let God break down my ego and chisel away at my ego. I have the capacity to now love you, forgive you, and see you in your process. But if I don't deal with my ego, I'm going to respond with my ego. And if this person is performing and I'm performing out of my ego, I promise you that the outcome will not be Christ-like. But anybody watching this video, I pray, I challenge you to really sit and pray about this. God, how much of my life, how much of my days am I operating and performing out of ego? Right? Because here's the thing. As we're following God, He got plans for you. He got opportunities for you. He got people for you to meet. He got a plan in place for you, right? But here's the reality. In that walk, it's either going to be ego or elevation. But it's not going to be both. Let me bring that back. In your walk with the Lord, it's either going to be ego or elevation. It cannot be both. So deal with the ego. What is your ego costing you? Look, I'm praying for revelation. I'm praying over clarity. And I'm praying for grace. As you walk through this journey, give yourself grace because you didn't know. I didn't know. A lot of people that go through that process, they didn't know. So give yourself grace. But don't be afraid to allow the Messiah to meet you in the messy middle. Oh, let me get out of here. Thank y'all for watching another video. I'm praying for your new normal. And as always, until next time, my friends, be blessed.